Welcome back to A Day or So Late Movie Reviews. My name is Phoenix Clouden, as many of you know, if you're familiar with this channel. And I do some recent movie reviews and a lot of late movie reviews. So today we're talking about quite possibly what could be considered the most perennial classic movie of all time, Rocky. The original Rocky is a movie that I recently just saw. I was so enthralled with the Rocky series once I watched this first one that I ended up watching Rocky 2, Rocky 3, Rocky 4, Rocky 5, and Rocky Balboa within the past month. So I'm going to talk about each of them, but today I definitely wanted to discuss the first Rocky movie. I don't like. I'm embarrassed at the fact that it took me so long to watch this movie. Granted, it came out in 1976. I wasn't born. I wouldn't be born for another 10 years. So, I think like another Rocky movie came out in between then. At least maybe two or more came in between the time I was born. But watching the very first Rocky, now some 30 odd years later, is such a unique experience because one, the movie itself holds up. It holds up well over time, and I think it's because the movie does so much to place you in its time period. It knows it's the 70s. It knows it's the 70s in Philadelphia, and it does everything to show you exactly how different that time is compared to now. And also, when it came out, that time embodied the 70s. You know what I'm saying? It completely embodied the 70s. So watching it now, I was taken back. I was taken to a time period that I never even was in. But it was beautiful to watch because you see this transition. And Rocky is a character study on a man who I think is got to be one of the most beloved characters of all time. And I think Sylvester Stallone, especially coming from somebody who's never seen a Sylvester Stallone movie, next up on my list is Rambo. But I fell in love with Sly and the character of Rocky through Creed, and I was like, well, now I got to check out these Rocky movies that I've heard so much about. And Rocky as a character is the kind of guy you have to root for. It's impossible not to root for him, especially in the first movie. He literally has no redeeming qualities other than the fact that, he's just an honest to God, decent person, and he really loves this girl, Adrian. And, and you're like, all right, at that point, you're like, I buy in, he's a hard to love kind of guy. He's decent, he's decent, and he really loves this girl. And then all of a sudden, enter my man, Carl Weathers, who I'm like, look, this dude is above and beyond one of my favorite characters ever written in any movie. He embodied this role of Apollo Creed so perfectly. I mean, so perfectly. Like, I legitimately thought he was a real boxer. I legitimately thought, I was like, this dude has to be a real boxer. He's way too good at this role. He's way too in shape. He's perfect. He has to be a real boxer. Let me know if he really was, because I'm still convinced that he was. But other than that, Carl Weathers was amazing. He has one of my favorite lines probably in any movie ever when he says, Apollo Creed versus the Italian Stallion. Sounds like a damn monster movie. I laugh so hard. But his story, and then you see his story combined with Rocky's story. They're both on so different paths, such different paths. And the way that they come to face each other is nothing short of a miracle. It's amazing, and it's one of those things. It's like it Rocky. I feel like later in the series, you discover that Rocky certainly had a different. I won't say different, but certainly had an ideological perspective that you're like, oh, I wouldn't expect that from you, Rocky. But in it makes sense when you look at this movie, because it's like he never asked for a handout. He never asked to be given this match. He was fully like blessed with this opportunity, and he took full advantage of it. And this is part of the reason why you root for this guy. Is like he's pretty much put in this situation where he gets to fight for the championship title. It's a once in a lifetime opportunity. It never happens, and it's compelling for this drama that we're experiencing. What I love most about the movie is that not even that the boxing element, because I'm a big boxing fan, and I'm like, but to me that was secondary to this story. I mean, because most of the movie is just you learning about Rocky himself. You learn about Rocky as a collector and how he's such a decent guy that he wouldn't break the dude's thumbs like Joe Spinelli asked him to. And you know what I'm saying, he did his job. He just didn't want to go that far. You know what I'm saying? You get to see how he falls in love with Adrian and why she's so special to him. You get to see his relationship with Mickey, which I think is one of the best on-screen relationships. Like, it's better than him and Adrian. Like, like in all honesty, and his the relationship with Adrian and the relationship with Paulie, and it all is so massive and it's so big, and actually it's so endearing. It endears you to this character because you're like, within the last 20 minutes, he's going to have to face the champ. And so you spend almost an hour and like 15 minutes of the movie just learning about Rocky's life and learning about how he gets this opportunity and how he uses it and who he surrounds himself with to give him the strength to take on this utterly impossible task. And I remember I felt like I was a kid in 1976, and suddenly I was transported to being like, I don't know, like 9 years old, and I'm seeing Rocky for the first time, and I'm watching this movie, and I'm just like, I'm like on pins and needles, like, oh man, what is Rock gonna do? You know what I'm saying? And then when he says, I can't beat him. He says, I can't beat him. I know I can't. He says, he's too good. The only way I can beat him, and this is after he's trained. He's trained, he's in shape, he can go, and he still says, look, there's no way I can beat this guy. He's just too good. And he says, the only thing I want to do is go the distance. And I'm like, it's like the composer, whoever is the composer who did that song, that dun, 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 that dude knew exactly what he was doing. Because I'm like, the minute Rocky says that, that's all like in my bones. All I could think of is like, dun, 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 let's go, Rock. Let's go. I'm with him there. And then finally, we get to the fight. And the fight is amazing. Okay, like, you got Apollo Creed, and he's messing with him. He thought this was a game, pretty much. He was like, I'm gonna play with the cat. You know what I'm saying? He comes out in his like red, white, and blue outfit, looking like Uncle Sam. It was awesome. It like gave the movie spectacle. You know what I'm saying? It raised the excitement. He's playing with him. He's toying with him. Then he gets hit with a quick one, and he's like, oh okay. And, he toughens up on him, And then he realizes, like, dang, bro, like, you know what I'm saying? I'm giving him the good ones, and he still won't go down. And it's about 10 rounds in when he realizes, it's like, all right, I'm done playing with you. Bow, bow. You know what I'm saying? And listen, man, I can't even talk about this movie without a smile on my face because it's so exciting and it's so intense. And when I first saw it and I realized okay, they did the first 3 rounds, they showed you the first 3 rounds, and then they started, montaging the rounds. And I was like, oh man, why they montaging, man? I want to see each round, you know what I'm saying? I'm like, but when they got to I don't know, round 14 or something like that, I was still by the time they got through round 14 and then they did round 15, I was still it's still exciting. Regardless of them montaging the rounds, it was still I can't believe it. And when for me, and maybe this is me being black, I loved Apollo Creed, and I'm like the whole movie, I'm like, look, I get that this is all based in Rocky's story, you know what I'm saying? We're looking at this from Rocky, he's the protagonist. So I was legitimately scared that they were gonna make Rocky win. And I was like, look, I get it, but I'm like, come on, you can't just introduce a character as good as Apollo Creed and just have him lose. I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. But so when they finally finish, and they just wailing to the last bell. I'm literally you see Joe Spinell's character just stand up I'm like, that was me. Because I was just that was so intense. And then my favorite line of this whole movie is when they're finished and they're holding on to each other, and you hear Apollo Creed go, ain't gonna be no rematch. Ain't gonna be no rematch. And then you hear Rocky go, don't want one. I'm like, oh my God, it's the biggest crescendo of the entire movie. And to me, it I think the best way I heard it put was that Rocky had sweat in his eyes and I had tears in mine. That's pretty much the best way I can describe it. It was one of those movies, and I found out it won Best Picture at the Oscars, and I was like, well deserved. But it's one of those movies where I was like, the magic of it, the grit of it, just the realness of it. It was hard. I won't say impossible, but definitely difficult to duplicate. And they still tried 5 more times. But the movie itself was magical, man. It was like a once in a lifetime experience. And I will say, I don't think the sequels ruined it. I feel like you can watch the first Rocky, still get all the feels from it, and watch the entire series as well, and still be like, yeah, even though, maybe 3 wasn't as great, maybe 5, we all know 5 wasn't great, you know what I'm saying? But watching them all, you're still for me personally, Rocky 2 is my personal favorite, but Rocky's still amazing. Rocky 4 is still amazing. Even Rocky Balboa, it ain't the best, but it holds up. And now with the Creed series, I feel like those are equally as good.
And the winner is Rocky, Irwin Winkler and Robert Chardoff, producers.